5 p.m. Let's call this meeting to order and begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please follow after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, I'll take roll. Ed Imsand.
Here, virtually.
Thank you, Ed. Dave Janis, here, obviously. Reality. Renee Westalusk. Absent. Nick Panzer.
Here.
Domestic well owner, West Katzenstein. Here. I don't know why I said the preface.
Here. There we go.
Lyle Fisher. And Lyle notified me just before the meeting that he's homesick. Judy Decker. Absent. Camille Anderson.
Here.
Tim Carroll.
Somebody's coming down the hallway.
Tim Carroll. Looks like Tim's absent. Don Zadiba.
Present.
Lorelei Oviatt. And Tom Bukowskis and John Kersey notified me they will not be here this evening, other commitments. Can you turn the gain down just a little bit? We're getting a little feedback. Thank you. Okay, Judy Decker.
Yes.
Judy's here.
I have 1 minute to 5.
That's 2 minutes after. So with that, we're ready to begin. We have a quorum. We have 6 present total. We only need 5 for the quorum, so we're ready to begin. And we'll start with open public comment on any issues that are not on the agenda. Free to public comment. There's a 3-minute limit. Thank you very much. Josh.
There we go. Joshua Nugent, Mojave Pistachios. Nice to see everybody. Glad that we're back in person here. So I just wanted to comment that we're excited and supportive of the facilitation process. We have responded positively to the request from the DWR, and just wanted to say that we really liked Dale Schaefer, the original process, the way that all worked. We all met at, I think, Spring Hill Suites a couple times. We met here. There was a couple of individual group meetings, and I really feel that Dale was a good kind of a steadying force that helped that process move along. And then a question for you guys would be is, do you see any role, or are you going to ask the GA what the role of the PAC would be within the facilitation process? You know, because I'm assuming that all the different represented groups are going to want to be there, so it might be nice to get a formal or an informal, you know, role at the facilitation process. So anyways, I'm glad to see you guys meeting. So thank you.
Thank you, Josh. Do we have any public comment from online? None noted. So with that, we're on item number 4, the approval of minutes for the September PAC meeting. You were all sent copies of that. I've received 1 response from Don Zadiba correcting my clerical errors. Nothing substantive of the content, just obvious clerical errors on my part. So any input? You have some? Go ahead.
Yeah, just one comment. There's a statement that on the very bottom of the first page under member comment, under item 5, Wes Katzenstein also noted that not all stakeholder groups have been alerted to the impacts to their water use, and we need to focus and target those stakeholders. That's not exactly what I meant to say. What I meant to say is I think we're at a point that we should be able to assume that all stakeholder groups have been alerted, and we need to put the focus now on providing the information that's, when they come looking for information, that we're providing the information that meets their needs. So I would reword that to say, it says, Wes Katzenstein also noted that not all stakeholder groups, I would just strike the word not. Wes Katzenstein also noted that all stakeholder groups, and I'll add, should be assumed to have been alerted to the impacts to their water use, and we need to focus and target those stakeholders. So just a simple change that we should assume they've been alerted. There's been major efforts by the Water District. There's been postcards mailed out. And I think it's time to stop beating on the GA for those folks that haven't climbed out from underneath a rock and started educating themselves. We should assume as we move forward that those groups have been alerted, and let's provide them the information they need when they come and seek information.
Yeah, sorry I didn't get the full context of that. And would you please forward me that language? Okay. Any other comments from the members?
I noted that neither the written comments by myself nor the 2 written comments from Nick Panzer were attached to the minutes. They need to be attached to the minutes.
Yeah, they are not part of the review, and they need to be sent to me electronically. I only had hard copies of them.
Okay.
So, and also, thanks, that was my note for the end of this item was all members providing individual comments for a PAC meeting, please submit them to myself. I'll gather them and forward them to April and ensure they are attached to the minutes for each month. So I've got some of the ones for the September meeting. I did not have and could not find any emails for either of the 2 comments that I had received for the August meeting. So if you'll, I think I had yours for September, Judy. I was thinking of the August meeting. However, I had some of them, but I didn't get all of them. So those of you that provided written input for the September meeting, please forward that, and I'll ensure they get into April for posting. Do I have a motion?
I will move, subject to what you just said, for approval of the minutes.
I second it.
Okay. And the motion is to approve the minutes with the amendments mentioned from Don and West and Judy. Any comment from the public before we vote? Any comment from the callers? Okay, with that, Ed M. Sand? Aye. Aye. I vote aye. Nick Panzer?
Aye.
Wes Katzenstein?
Aye.
Camille Anderson?
Aye.
I'm sorry, I skipped Judy Decker. Judy?
Aye.
Thank you. And you're non-voting, Don? Sorry you don't get to say, even though you provided good corrections. That's nice to know. All right. Thank you. And with that, we have, and my request to please, Renee just arrived. Renee, do you want to vote on that one?
Yeah, I read the minutes over. They're fine. I approve.
Okay. Please make sure we get all electronic comments into me for appropriate. The ones you provided before the meeting are the ones we need, not subsequent to a meeting. And we'll get them attached. Okay, item number 5, selection of a PAC vice chair. With the resignation of Pat Quist just prior to the last meeting, that leaves us both without a representative, without one of the representatives for small ag, as well as without a vice chair for the committee. And so I would request, do we have a nomination or an interest from anyone in serving in that role? I can't be a sole point of failure for this committee.
I'll volunteer.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I just
Yeah,
have
no.
a question.
I nominate Judy.
Wait till we maybe or get some nominations to fill these missing seats?
Ed, we can't hear you.
I'm talking right at it here. Can you hear me now?
Can you turn the volume up, Riley?
All the way up.
That's much better.
Okay, that's much better. Go ahead, Ed.
Okay. I'm just wondering if we can table that till we fill some of the seats on the PAC committee, if we can, and put the vice chair selection off until January.
Other member comments?
I have no objection to his suggestion.
Given my health, I would not advise that.
Okay.
All right.
And Ed, I understand the desire to get a richer set of choices, perhaps, or available options for us. However, we don't, as we know from this whole process, it takes quite a while to find someone to express an interest or be recruited, perhaps, and that would delay it. And I would think we would like to have a vice chair in place to back me up if in any of these meetings, should I not be able to make it. I would certainly think that would be better for the public and keeping our engagement with them throughout the next implementation period. So,
whatever we can do. We were thinking of talking to a few people to see if they could fill some of those spots, but I haven't done it yet.
Yeah, I would. Well, and I've talked to a couple of folks, but not successful yet. And I would encourage you. I agree. Even absent, if we select a vice chair, we should certainly want to have the more complete representation on the panel or on the committee itself. And so, thank you. And Renee.
Okay.
Thank you, Ed. And Renee was making a nomination, I think.
Yeah, I'll nominate Judy Decker.
Okay, I think she was already okay.
She said she volunteered, but
Oh.
I think you need a formal nomination. Or...
Yes, we do.
Then I will second that nomination.
Okay. Any other nominations or discussion? Any discussion from the public? Public input? Any callers on this subject? None. With that, we'll do a roll call vote for vice chair. Ed Imsand?
Abstain.
David Janis? Aye. Renee Westalusk?
Aye.
Nick Panzer?
Aye.
West Katzenstein? Aye. Stein. Judy Decker?
Aye.
Camille Anderson?
Aye.
And with that, I want to thank you, Judy, for volunteering to step up for that. Hopefully, there might not be any, you might not have to be involved. And I say hopefully because that would mean that I've had some kind of issue. But thank you for volunteering. And
I sincerely hope so, David.
Thank you. All right. And so with that, we've gotten to our main subject for the meeting, the primary subject at this meeting and objective, the communication and engagement plan review and recommendations. And that is regarding the subcommittee, ad hoc subcommittee recommendation that is provided in writing and was provided by the subcommittee chair, Wes Katzenstein, working with the other three members of that committee over the last month. And so you have that in front of you, and I assume everybody has read through it, including the cover pages and then the individual examples of the types of communication and subject areas of interest and subject targets, specifically all the individual stakeholder groups for communication. So with this, the recommendation, the committee was tasked with what specific activities should the Groundwater Authority undertake to increase the effectiveness of the C&E plan, and there were a framework for those. Then the second question was, having identified all of those, should the C&E plan be revised? And we were each to provide, in addition to the subcommittee, each of us as individuals were to provide individual comments on that. So item A in the plan, I'll take it in order that we have it in the tasking and the recommendation. We'll talk first about the subcommittee report items that all the rest of them come under item B from the first page on. So with that, I'll open up discussion on the committee report as written. And the intent of this is those things that we can reach agreement on, we would forward to the Groundwater Authority itself. Maybe we'll agree on modifications in some cases or deletions, or perhaps the optional outcomes here are, I think there are some things we may agree on, there are some things we may not. We may choose to have a dissenting opinion submitted with the report, or send part of it back to the committee if we think there's value in them further engaging, having heard the discussion. So, comments overall.
David, are we talking about comments on Part A?
Yes.
Or overall?
We're talking first about Part B, which is all the specific activities, and it's the entire report really. And then Part A was our agenda item B, because that was my intent in developing. We were each going to provide individual comments on the C&E plan itself. Plus, there was a subcommittee group formed to look at those special activities and functions and methods of communication and focus areas that the GA should take per our recommendation. And then was there something that came out of the committee that they would recommend because of those items to go into a potential individual or draft C&E plan update. Does that help clarify?
Yes.
Thank you.
I'd like to make one comment that we did, in Section B, we made specific recommendations, and in some cases to the point of suggesting specific documents that are written in there, and that's where a lot of the contention came up, and I'm sure that'll be addressed. But it seems to me that we might want to take the point of view that as we move forward, we could come up with additional suggestions for specific focus statements for specific stakeholders that the GA might make available both on their website and as handouts. And so in my mind, the challenge here has been that, first of all, that for example, for any specific stakeholder, the actions that are being taken are buried in a number in the GSP and number of actions taken by the Groundwater Authority, and sometimes they're also buried in results of the modeling. And so I think we all understand what those actions are, but if a member of the public who had become alerted wanted to start from kind of square zero and understand how we're moving forward, it would be nice to have that information available on the website and then perhaps in handouts. I think it's safe to say that the stakeholders in Big Ag and at Searles Valley Minerals understand everything that's going on, and they probably don't need any simple statements. On the other side of the coin, you know, the residential users of the water district and perhaps the domestic well owners and others, it would be nice if there was a clear pathway to them to understand what's going on, both in handouts and also if they entered the GA website. So I guess my main point here is that we probably should not assume that there would not be more suggestions for area of focused, clear introductory statements more than the ones we've provided here.
So what you're saying is this should be reviewed from time to time as the need arises, correct?
That would be correct, yes, as we move forward.
And I think, at least from my standpoint of being on this subcommittee, we viewed the suggestions that we made more as not revising the entire plan, but in fact being maybe a set of amendments to add to it. Is that right, Wes?
Well, in my mind, I guess first of all our goal would be if we identify specific stakeholders that we think need to have better introductory material, then we might decide how best the GA could communicate that.
No, I'm talking about the suggestions you wrote in your report that we discussed as a subcommittee and that are in our report, that we all felt strongly that the C&E plan as it stands was okay. Am I correct?
Correct.
All right.
And David suggested that might be the second part of our dialogue here, but I agree with what you said.
But I think the rest of the committee members need to know that even though it's written down.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Mr. Chairman, I took Wes' comment to mean not so much for updating in the future, which we would do too, but today. So we're inviting additional comments. If I heard you right, Wes, you're looking for ways to expand the report that's before you, so we have even more items to talk about today, if people have them. Is that what you were suggesting?
Right. I was thinking now and as we move forward as maybe a process. Right now we have three specific examples. One is Indian Wells Valley groundwater fact sheet, and there were the two documents you provided, Nick, the summary of the sustainability plan and also a look at the potential increase in water costs for water district customers. And as we move forward, there may be other specific areas that we think we could potentially provide succinct, to the point overviews for those stakeholders.
Chairman, if I could.
Yes.
I just want to say I appreciate and I agree with Judy Decker's comments pertaining to the document of potential increase in water costs for water district customers. I believe it's the water district responsibility, not the groundwater authorities, to communicate with our customers, much like we did when the replenishment fee was being implemented. We used newspaper articles, our Facebook page, our website. We even created a bill calculator on our website where customers could put their actual data in and calculate or determine the impact of the fees. And I would also be concerned with putting something like this out, which gives an expectation. There's a specific number. You're putting an expectation out to people that may or may not be good news for them. And that number is based on a calculation that has variables in it that may or may not be accurate. I would point out, for example, the average monthly use which is a number I did put out in September of 2020. That number very likely has changed because we've seen in July, August, and September water use go down. So my point is 13.1 probably isn't going to be an accurate number. Also, the cost of the imported water, although again it's cited as a number that was in the GSP, 4250, that is a variable. We don't know for sure if it's going to be more, probably will be more. Then also the 2117 acre feet. As you know, if you're talking about state Title A entitlements, you only get 0.62% historical average, recent historical average, so you have to actually purchase more than that. In addition to that, the board of the directors of the water district has placed a priority on recycled water. There's 2,000 acre feet available from the city's new wastewater treatment facility. If the water district were to get some or even all of that, that number would come down. So I really would hesitate to put something like this out to the public at this time. I would leave it to the water district to communicate with our customers when we have a better idea of what those costs would be. And we can update our bill calculator, and each individual customer can actually calculate the impact for their own consumption.
Thank you, Don. Ed, do you have any comments?
Yeah, I do. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we got you loud and clear.
Right on. First, I want to thank all the committee members for taking the time and effort to come up with this committee draft plan. We did just get it on Tuesday, and then the poem came out today. So we'd like a little more time to analyze, and then we'll have formal comments. But we do have some concerns on the fact sheet and the chart. It looks, I can see it, but I can see that it could be very confusing to some people right now. Some of the numbers really have no reference that are on there. And then we also talks about water rights and pumping history and hydrological facts. And as the committee admitted that those are highly contentious areas. So a lot of this stuff that's on the fact sheet goes beyond what the GSP has said about how we attempt to go about this. And, the last thing would be the water district's comment. I would agree with fully. I don't think that should be coming from the PAC. It should be from the water district trying to calculate people's assessment if they're ratepayers. So that's it.
Thank you, Ed. Renee, do you have comments?
Yeah, I just want to say that, first of all, I guess I failed to turn in a personal comment on the CE plan, but I don't see a need for a major revision. Okay. I had stated at the last meeting that I thought we should update, maybe increase some of the outreach methods, because electronics have changed in the last few years, and there might be some venues we could use to communicate with people. And then I wanted the elected officials list. I still think it's important to have the names of the elected officials and the district numbers and all that, because sometimes most people don't even know who to contact. So, and then my big read on all this, I think it's nice to have a fact sheet, but to me it would have to be approved by the Groundwater Authority Board. And as far as I agree with Don Zadiba about putting out any figures, financial figures. I think it's not our purview to be doing that or informing people how much more their water is going to cost. I do like the idea. I reviewed the Owens Valley, their communication plan, and they had a segment pages 12 through 19 that talked about essential communication strategies. And I thought maybe we might glean one or two methods or ways of communicating from their plan we could put into ours, if we want to. They even suggested doing the handout thing in one part of this. They said provide notices and updates in print publications. So I think it would be worth looking at the Owens just for minor adjustments to our plan. But I think the communications and engagement plan is pretty much fine the way it is, just needs minor tinkering at this time. That's my opinion. Thank you.
And Carol, as general manager, do you have comments on the committee plan or committee report?
Hi, Dave. Yeah, and I think that they generally echo what we've been hearing. I agree that I think it would be good for us to enhance our efforts. I like the idea of some of these documents. I do think that the cost of water needs to stay with the water district. It's up to the water district to pass on those fees, and I'm sure they can do a great job of communicating that. So yeah, I agree that should stay with the water district. I like the idea, though, of the fact sheet, and I think that's something we can work on and have available at the meetings. So generally, I think, I think that's doable. Definitely the fact sheet is doable. Some of the additional information, might not be something that we want to put out right away, but I think there's definitely more information that we can make available. The website is something that we know needs to be improved. Everything boils down to time and money and resources. So right now, April has been the only one available to work on updating the website. It might be that in the future we'll be able to have some additional resources and maybe even, make some positive changes to the website and its accessibility and the information that we put on it. I do think that there's a good opportunity for us to increase our public information and our educational materials that we have available. And so I really appreciate the PAC subcommittee taking the time to do this review and put out these recommendations and suggestions. I think we can do some of these improvements quite easily, and I'm happy to work with you on them.
Thank you, Carol. For my inputs, they're similar with some small differences to what's been brought forward by all the members so far. I think, especially the water district responsibility to do this kind of communication, which could be then presented by the GA, since the water district is a member of the board itself, and in coordination, because there are some differences in implementation that would require some discussion between the water district and the GA for something that was published along those lines. I also believe that the website is going to be one of the primary methods of communication to do some of this. For the Q&A, for example, and frequently asked questions could be folded into one. So they could be on the website and then presented at various positions or various times when things change in meetings or available in meetings, the Q&A. I liked the overall overview documents. I particularly like the idea, the concept of disclosing information by stakeholder. And I would disagree with the conclusion of the committee that some stakeholders are perhaps better, more informed on that themselves on what their impact is. But it is our concern as a committee representing all the stakeholders that all the information is out there for any of the public to review. So I, as a ratepayer, and we know there are issues with the impact to ag in this community, with the impact to Searles Valley Minerals, Trona, I would like to see, and I would expect to see, that all the users are going to want to see not only is what is the impact to me, but what is the impact to my neighbors, my other stakeholders, because we're all in this basin together. And I think that's just an equitable representation of what should be done. Is we should, if there are stakeholders that have individual concerns and impacts, and there are, that are different, that those stakeholders should have their impacts represented so others can see them, even if they are aware of them. And I would make no assumptions about what level of awareness folks have. So I have the idea of that simplified communication will be necessary. If somebody really wants to get into this and up to speed, it's something we should all be considering. What are the impacts on all groups? Not just me, obviously that's important, not just an individual, but all the stakeholders in the valley. That's part of what in our charter this committee was formed to do, was to look at it, to try. We represent individual groups, but we want to try to represent a consensus or understanding at the very least of what the issues are, an expression of those. So I would propose a modification to say it's all of them, and I would also propose a modification to the report to say to really further emphasize that these are example handouts. These are not the actual numbers. Don pointed out some of the potential things that might be in error or open for debate within those numbers. I think Carol referred to that too. And I know there are many things in these that relate to costs, for example, from what is being done with regards to the long-term infrastructure funding grants that we have been proposing. I myself have been working for 3.5 years very diligently to look for options and put options in the federal budget, the defense budget, the non-defense budgets, the state budgets with regards to funding the infrastructure. And some have been very close to bearing fruit, and I think at the November meeting of the Groundwater Authority Board, we may hear about some progress at the state level with regards to from Capital Corps, and perhaps it's good news on some things that may be in progress, not yet formal, but a real boon to the community. We've done pretty well in Project 6 or grant. What am I saying? The grant 1 and Prop 1 and Prop 68 grants. I'm sorry, senior moment. And I think there's some opportunity for us in the state budget, as you've all heard at the Groundwater Authority meetings, that the state has a really, it's not a windfall because they took the money from us, the taxpayers, at the federal level and transitioned it to California, and some of that's been put into the budget at the state level, and there are multiple options in that budget, and I expect that we are going to hear something very positive along that line at the November meeting. So those kinds of considerations need to be included in any, as we get to specifics in any of these, that might influence people's rates and impacts. There is obviously a lot of concern in the public as will we get those? Several of those programs have been lined up and were available for funding at the federal level if we'd have had a plan, sufficient engineering design for a project to apply for it. We partnered with other communities and bases to advocate for certain language, and it got into the National Defense Authorization Act, and appropriated after 3 years and is available right now. We don't know, given the political climate, how long those things will be available, given the political climate. But those kinds of that kind of information should be at least referenced. These aren't absolute numbers that are going to go into those kinds of documents. So with the caveat that that we've all talked about, and I'll go back and list them, I would think the proposals of the committee be accepted. One more comment. Plan of action and milestones is not, I don't think, is the term we want to use. That is a specific term for a specific project with deliverables and very tightly organized and very expensive to do. We had that with the groundwater sustainability plan. We do not have that now. We have individual pieces of it underneath that might be appropriate for a POAM, but an integrated set of schedules, and we should specifically state that, well, it does state it, tracking projects and related finances. That's what we want, but I would suggest we change that name to schedule. And with that, do we have any additional member comments?
Yeah, a couple comments. I'm not going to argue about who should perhaps provide some of these documents, but I believe there is a need. There is a plan right now for allocation from the Groundwater Authority, and of course it's challenged. It's going to be challenged by legal actions. But I think as we move forward, there needs to be available somewhere a short and brief overview of the allocations as it now stands and why. If someone wants to know where these numbers come from that we're hearing and why is Searles Valley Minerals so unhappy and why are the farmers so unhappy, they need to understand the approach the Groundwater Authority is taking now and why. And that needs to be available. And so it may not be our job to provide that, perhaps, but I think there is a gap. You know, I think all of us here, we've been part of the proceedings of the GA and watched the GSP be developed and watched the modeling efforts and watched the actions that the GA has taken. We've seen the engineer's report, but the allocation scheme that exists now is a derivative of all those actions. And if someone is a newcomer and they go to the website or they come to one of these meetings, they're not going to know where it came from. So I think there is a need for somebody to provide something that performs the same function as the chart that talks about the summary of the GSP. I think there is a need for that. It's not there.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Now, talking about the chart, the ratepayers, I think there's one thing that's in that that's kind of been overlooked, and that is it's not guaranteed yet who's going to pay for the infrastructure, and you've just addressed that. So it seems to me, kind of the word to the residents of the valley any numbers that have come out have really only focused on purchasing the water entitlements. And we hope that we are successful in finding federal money or some money to put the infrastructure in. But it seems to me that at least there ought to be mention of this as a potential cost in the future, so that as we move forward, we're leveling with the community as to the total scope of costs that might occur. So I think there is a need, at least in a general sense, maybe expand what the Water District is doing to be sure that they're aware that there are assumptions being made about who pays for the infrastructure. And I think it's something that would be more transparent to the community, would increase transparency. So those are pretty much my observations that I think there were some gaps that we kind of tried to address here. And maybe an outcome of this would be that there might be a little more succinct and introductory information available on both of these areas, no matter where it comes from.
I agree with your comments.
I have several comments. This is Judy Decker. However, Camille, do you have any comments?
I do have some comments.
I would like to hear your comments before I make mine.
Okay. I agree with Renee that we should definitely update the plan as far as the government entities, make sure the names and numbers are correct of the various districts. I also would like to see an update on the organizations to have email addresses in addition to phone and mail address, because the communication plan seems to focus on mailing, and most people would prefer to get emails. As far as the subcommittee report, I like the framework of number one, providing overview documents, Q&A handouts, a schedule, upgrade the website, maybe have a fact section, and encourage informal dialogue. However, on the specifics of the documents provided as an example, I agree with both Renee and Don Zadiba that it should not include water district information. I also disagree with the summary of the sustainability plan. I think it's too simplified and also too complicated at the same time.
When you say that, are you referring to the chart?
I'm
or
referring to the
fact sheet?
chart and the explanation underneath it.
Okay.
And the reason for that is, number one, the plan has not been adopted by DWR. Number two, the explanation of where the numbers come from is very nuanced. In fact, as you know, when the chart initially came out with the engineer's report, it's multi-pages. To try and condense that for everybody to understand in a half a page misses a lot of information and assumptions that are made when the chart was developed. So I disagree with that. However, I do agree that some overview documents to simplify certain things should be provided to the public. I would like to see recommendations from the PAC that are then approved by the Groundwater Authority. I do not think that the PAC should be developing documents necessarily for the Groundwater Authority if they have not asked for them. However, we could suggest, and those are my comments.
So, Camille, to clarify, your last two statements, I interpreted them as being a little bit in conflict. You don't want us to provide examples per se for a specific topic, or you do?
We have not been asked by the Groundwater Authority to explain the summary of the Indian Wells Valley Groundwater Sustainability Plan.
But
We've not been asked specifically by them to talk about potential increase in water costs for water district customers. If at some point we decided that that was necessary as the whole PAC, then I would think that we would recommend to the Groundwater Authority that that be developed and suggest that the PAC could work on that, as opposed to the other way around, which it seems like we've developed a bunch of handouts that we want to distribute regardless of the Groundwater Authority's input or other PAC members.
Okay, I understand better. I think we're almost in violent agreement on that topic from the majority of what I've heard from the committee here. It's a difference in semantics and focus. We do have the task to make recommendations, and at the last Groundwater Authority, in summarizing our meeting of the last PAC meeting, I stated that our intent was to go down this path to make focus area recommendations. And so we've identified, this plan has identified areas of focus specifically that we thought, based on what they did ask us to do or we requested to do. The original ask was just to review the C&E plan. Our focus was the plan generally is good, and now we need to tell you what specific items and focus areas you want to address and have the GA addressed to the public. So this is a list of those recommendations for the specific areas and types of communications, and the 3 example documents that we have here, I agree entirely that they are not the responsibility of the PAC, but they are examples. But there could be, and there is some confusion from folks as to whether these represent official documents and data. And I think we pretty much agree they do not at this point in time. And if we go forward with a sample document, I would think we need to, as I stated earlier, make further clarifications that they are samples. And from my past experiences, any organization that was providing that would have stamped a gray out of draft over in big letters of the entire document, and perhaps a notation that content and numbers are not confirmed, but for example only, something to that effect. We can come up with the words.
I would like to make my comments.
Yes, Judy.
Because I was part of this committee and I provided a written set of comments to you. Don Zadiba has mentioned them. No one else has. I certainly hope that the rest of the committee read them. I can agree with the fact sheet and the idea of a website, but like Carol said, it requires money, time, and personnel to create what is suggested in our committee report. I think that one of the most important things that we did provide you was the idea that the GA board needs to, if it's not a poem, it's something like it. They need to create a list of projects, a timeline for them, and where the money is going to come from to pay for them. Because it's the people of this valley or the landowners of this valley who are going to be paying the bills, either directly through fees or through taxes. I am opposed 100% to providing the allocation chart that was in the GSP and the paper about the water rates. Don Zadiba said it right up front. It is the responsibility of the water district to inform their customers of what their fees are for and how much they're going to be. It is not the responsibility of the Groundwater Authority. So therefore, it is not the PAC's responsibility at all. As I wrote in my document to you, the allocation chart was put together in a hurry. Its numbers are questionable. They're confusing, and they are probably going to change. And so I think putting out a paper about that at this point in time will cost money, and it will be confusing no matter how it's written. We have before the GA board at least half a dozen lawsuits. The Water District has filed an adjudication. Depending on how the judge rules on that adjudication and rules on the lawsuit from Mojave Pistachios, from Sills Valley Minerals, these allocation numbers are going to change. They are estimates at best. No one knows exactly how much water is used except the individual water provider or user. When it comes to small farms, small agriculture, and for de minimis users, they don't know either because 99% of them probably don't have meters. So things are confused now. We don't need to provide impetus for more confusion. If you proceed to vote on this as a package, I will have to vote no.
Don?
Chairman, if I understood what your comment was earlier, you were in favor of putting the documents out with a draft watermark or something like that. I know I don't have a vote, but I would be opposed to that again because I think putting a document out on the water costs, even if it's a draft, you're setting an expectation with customers that, again, I commend Mr. Panzer for putting the document together, and I do acknowledge he used numbers that were from existing documents, but again, too many variables in the calculation here. And you put a number like $506 a year out, that's going to be in people's mind, even if it says draft. I don't think that's a good idea to do that at this point in time until we have a better idea of what that number is going to be. And again, I think it's the water district's responsibility to communicate that to the customers.
My comment on the draft was what if we end up providing any kind of sample document, that's what we would do. Not, I wasn't saying take this one and put draft over the top of it.
Yeah, an observation. First of all, I chaired the committee, and my goal was to be sure that no ideas got squashed, that everything came forward. Secondly, I think there is, in my mind, perhaps our output should, instead of giving example documents, perhaps should be to identify gaps in what we consider to be straightforward overview communications that stakeholders will need. So perhaps it would be, and I guess I'm asking you, David, interpret your comments, but perhaps what we're saying is instead of providing a numerical example, it has all the criticisms that we've just heard about ratepayer costs, we might identify a gap that no one's really addressed, perhaps the water district, the fact that the ratepayers might be paying for the infrastructure, and maybe be a little more open in that. So I think also perhaps we should identify a gap in the area of communicating the plan as it now exists, the GSP as it now exists, and suggest that perhaps the GA provide a simple explanation of that with all the caveats so that if somebody goes looking for that chart, even if it's subject to change and in question, that they can find it and it's not buried in a number of actions and documents within the GSP.
That's a one sentence direction to the public. They can find that document in the GSP at the IWVGSP website. That's it. That's where it came from.
I think it came from the engineer's report, right, which is not part of the GSP. And so it is buried in a lot of actions and studies and reports. And a summary of that, I think, would be valuable for the public. That's my only point. But what I'm suggesting is perhaps what I hear us saying is our job should be to identify areas for all the stakeholders that we think that some simplified explanations and straightforward explanations might be of benefit. And I think I heard you mention all stakeholders earlier, Dave. So anyway, I guess as we move forward, we need to know what our guidance is. And I kind of hear us heading towards don't provide specific numbers, but perhaps be prepared to identify gaps in communication.
I think that's a good summary, but I would expand on it a little bit and capture more underneath the idea of gaps on each specific gap you identify. You might say to address, this needs to be addressed as a gap, but it should include this level of specific information about these subjects. That's our recommendation. So, for example, on the water district ratepayer costs, it could be those specific items without the sample numbers. And when I say specific items, I don't mean line by line. I mean the types of items and costs and sources and whatnot and caveats. So using that one as an example, you might have one paragraph or a lead paragraph with a set of bullets under it. What are the individual specific subtopics in that focus area or gap area that you might want to have included
Why would you single out one group of stakeholders over all the other groups of stakeholders?
I didn't.
You are when you're talking about the water district customers.
And I said we should do this for every stakeholder. There should be one of these, in my opinion, we focused on 2 or 3 of them here. There should be one of these for every stakeholder. That should be our goal. So that, and with that, I think perhaps we better take time to hear from the public before we come back.
You have one more PAC member that
Yes.
hasn't been invited to
We'll
speak.
come back. We'll come back for PAC member comment too. But go ahead, unless you want to do it now.
No, I'm don't worry, I'll wait.
Okay. Yeah. Obviously, before we figure out our path ahead and what we want to approve or not, or what action we want to take, I do want to hear at this point input from the public on this overall task. And we're talking about the subcommittee report for the communication and engagement plan review and recommendations. So any comment from in the audience?
Don Decker, am I on the air here? Yes. I think the problem that you guys are facing is that you've got a really complex set of interlocking pieces that really have not been described clearly for anybody. And the attempts here are I think, absolutely intending to go in a useful direction, but you're getting bogged down in too much detail. And the idea that you pull back to a level where you're talking about what's going on without so much numerical complication is where you're going to start. That would be your recommendation. And I think the fact sheet is an example of a non-numerical, or at least it was the last time Judy showed it to me, a non-numerical explanation of what the sustainability program is intending to be. A lot of people, even though they're complaining about their water district bills, for example, they really struggle with the numerical part of it. And the frustration of that is partly the reason for their anger. They bog down with the number part of it. So to the extent that that can be even avoided, I think is a direction that's useful. And your recommendations of compartmentalizing, meaning that you address the specific stakeholder groups, is essential because they are so different one to the other. And I think anytime you have a committee, as you have here, you have ignited the confusion problem over again in a completely different way, but it's part of the game. That's where a little beer after hours helps.
Are you buying? I'm kidding. And you're right, but it was the opinion of this entire PAC committee that there were gaps and things that we needed to address in focus areas, that the basic C&E plan was pretty darn good, and in some cases followed really well, and others it obviously hadn't reached the public. But there are a lot of those inconsistencies that we could hope to address and point out. As representatives of stakeholder groups, we hear from our groups and we engage with our groups, and we know what kinds of questions we're getting back, and that informs the gaps and things that we think need to be simplified and address and make the recommendation to the Groundwater Authority Board overall. Any comments from the callers or the internet? Seeing nothing, I'll bring it back to the board or to the committee. And Nick, you had some comments?
Thank you, David. Several. Referring you to the subcommittee report, the second page, overview documents, provide short handouts. To me, short is one page. That's just my personal opinion, and I try to stay within that in crafting the documents that follow here. To meet available at all GA-sponsored public forums, other public places, etc. That intend to explain the role of the GA in adopting and implementing the GSP. So I'll stop there and say that the data sheet, I think, does a good job of explaining the GA, the adoption of a GSP. It answers some basic questions about imbalance. It acknowledges the numerous uncertainties through litigation, through intervention, through possible takeover control by the control board, a number of things. And so I like that high level of text for those that want nothing more than that they want something simple that they can read and understand. I agree. It's simple, it's brief, and I like that in there. The next two depict the overdraft problem at a glance, depict the GSP solution at a glance. When I use the word depict, I envision a picture rather than text, something more like a chart. Situation where a picture is worth 1,000 words. And I think that the GSP chart does that. It takes 1,000 pages of GSP, including the appendices and various attachments, and reduces it to a simple page, as simple as you can get on one page. So for those that want to get beyond the first page, the data sheet, and say, I want more, I'd like to understand at a glance what the overall problem is. The GSP chart does that, in my opinion. It shows the 28,000 that we're extracting right now. It shows that we have to get down to what we're currently assuming is a sustainable yield. It shows how the different parties interrelate in terms of who gets access to the groundwater and who has to pay fees. I think it's an excellent overall one-page view for those, again, that care to get beyond the data sheet. The next one is disclose the solution's potential impact on specific stakeholders. The guts of the GSP is importing. Without that, there is not balance. It's well explained why we need to import if we want to maintain our current lifestyles. And customers of the water district have from the get-go, including myself, stood up here at this podium and asked, what is this going to cost? And they've never been provided an answer to that question. And I think they're entitled to an answer. And I believe that that answer should come from the Groundwater Authority. It's the Groundwater Authority's plan. They adopted it. And there's three elements, key factors in the determination of what importing is going to, how that's going to impact each and every one of the customers of the water district. The GA controls two of those three factors. One of them is the cost per acre foot, $42.50 is what's in the Stetson's report. And it's well explained in there, what's covered, how it's financed, and their calculation, their assumed rate of interest on the debt financing, it's all right there. That's a GA number. The allocation is also a GA number. That's not a water district number. So there's two of the three. And those factors are not going to change. The numbers behind them will, and I'll talk about that in a minute. The third factor is how much water district customers use water. Okay? You do not have to attend a water district meeting to get that number. It's on your water bill every month. I look at mine every month. I know how much I'm using, and I know how much I'm using in relation to the average residential customer. But every customer, not just residential that I happen to represent, but the large institutions, the hospital, Cerro Coso College, big water users. Even the city gets some of its water, as I understand it, from the water district. Every one of them, we're all in the same boat. But those are the three factors. And right now, we have answers to all those. Anybody that gets a water bill, whether they like it or not, it's posted right on your water bill. What amount did you use this month? And with that number, with the 4250 that Stetson's come up with now, and the allocation that is currently proposed by the Groundwater Authority, it is easy to determine an average fee associated with importing. Now, in constructing these documents, the GSP chart, the allocation chart, if you will, and the worksheet, they're specifically designed to account for any changes in the future. If we get a better number on natural recharge, if we revise our estimate on per acre foot cost of water, or if I or you or the hospital or the college uses more or less water, they control that number. They don't have to trouble the water district whatsoever. It's right on their bill every month. So these documents, the allocation chart, as we're calling it now, I call it the GSP chart, or the worksheet, are easily updated in a flash with a new and better number. By constituents, I do happen to represent residential ratepayers. Many, again, like me, have stood up here over the last several years and said, what is it going to cost? They're entitled to an answer. They're entitled to it, in my opinion, from the Groundwater Authority. It's the Groundwater Authority's plan. They control two of the three fixed factors in determining how much the water district customers are going to pay. It's for that reason that I consider their inclusion in this report going up to the GA imperative. I could not vote to move this thing forward unless those are in there. And I accept, from what I've heard so far, that I'm in the minority, and I appreciate my opportunity, as Judy has expressed hers, to go on record as a minority report should it come out that way. But that's my case for those documents. And I thank you for your time.
I have a question for you, Nick.
Yep.
Do you think the PAC has the responsibility to analyze and report back to the GA on the city's wastewater fees?
Excuse me, that last sentence I missed.
Do you think that the PAC and our subcommittee has a responsibility to analyze and report back to the GA on the city's wastewater fees, whereby the GA would be dealing with the city's wastewater fees, like you're proposing that they deal with the water district fees?
Okay, I'm not sure, Judy, I understand your question.
Okay.
You're introducing wastewater in here.
My question has nothing to do with the wastewater. I used it as an example. We have a governing agency that was formed with a JPA, the Indian Wells Valley Groundwater Authority. It is comprised of 5 different governing agencies. I do not hear the Groundwater Authority telling or trying to regulate or illustrate or anything else the details, for instance, of Inyo County. or of the City of Ridgecrest wastewater fees that you pay every year on your taxes. You are proposing that the Groundwater Authority provide information that belongs and is the responsibility of the Indian Wells Valley Water District, which is a special district that was created by the state of California in 1955 or 53. I think that is overstepping the boundaries of the responsibility of the Groundwater Authority, and by that, also this PAC.
Okay, well, again, I can only repeat myself. I'm not suggesting how the water district should conduct their business. All I'm doing in this computational chart is telling every customer of the water district, 30,000 residents and a number of businesses, institutions, tons of customers, where they can go to find out one number. How much water am I using? I think that's a useful number to them. It's also, Don's very helpfully provided what an average for a household is. I compare myself to that. Say it with me here, Judy. So I'm not suggesting anything to the water district about what they should do. All I'm doing is saying through this handout sheet, for anyone who cares to read it, if you go to your bill, you can find out how much water you're using, and combined with the other information in the sheet, you can get a rough estimate of the average cost based on your current usage. And I recognize, and I say right in here, these numbers are going to change. And they're not going to change just because adjudication has been settled or a lawsuit's been settled. There's going to be revisions in time to the amount of estimated recharge. There's going to be revisions regularly to the cost of water in the spot market or financing. And my point is those are easily integrated into the chart. The form is there. You still have just the three factors, and those numbers are going to change, and they will change forever.
There are also, I looked at my water district bill that came about a week ago, and it says Groundwater Authority fees. They also include in that total fee pumping fees. Is that not correct, Don?
That's correct. That's a combination of both the $105 per acre foot pumping fee, which translates to 24 cents per 100 cubic feet, and the $2,130 replenishment fee, which translates into $1.70 for a total of $1.94 per 100 cubic feet.
Excuse me, I'm not talking fees here, Judy. I'm talking usage, quantity of water used. That's the only number, and it's on your water bill. So I'm not looking at the dollars. I'm looking at the usage of water.
Let me make a suggestion here. It seems that we're arguing, we're discussing a document that we think some clarification is necessary for each stakeholder group, and in this case, it's the water district residential customers, of which I am one.
All customers.
Of the water district.
Yes.
Yeah.
Not just residential.
Oh, all right, thank you. I misspoke. The point is that that fee is a combination of multiple agencies. And in this case, the water district and the water district is one of the big three members of the groundwater authority itself. And perhaps our recommendation, focusing on the gap concept, is here's what you need to address for this residential group, the specific sub areas of focus. And the GA must itself come to agreement for what is in that, because what each does, the water district can do things to impact that cost to an individual. So perhaps it isn't our choice to make a direct or recommend a direction as to which one should solely put it out, but it should be put out from the groundwater authority, perhaps, since they have a function, with the approval of the water district, or it could be other way around. It seems to me it would be the former, and that might be a way to approach this, because there is a need for this.
I would just state again, rather than put a document out with an average impact, I would state again that when the replenishment fee was being considered by the groundwater authority and the pumping fee was already in effect, again, we put together a bill calculator, put it on our website, and it had those charges in there before they were even put into effect. So customers could go in there and again look at their bill, say, oh, I used 100 cubic feet this month, put that number in there. They can put their zone in, just a couple numbers to put in. Most residential customers, all residential customers are 3/4 inch meters, so that's you don't have to check that. Most of them are in the A zone, you don't have to check that. All information is on your bill. Put that data into the calculator, it'll tell you what your bill is going to be. Rather than put a number out like this, customers can go to that website and see how is it going to affect me personally.
Yeah, and perhaps that would be one of the sub-focus areas that should be included in the summary for ratepayers.
And that's why I'm saying I think the water district is responsible for communicating with our customers what the impact of groundwater authority fees are, not the groundwater authority. And we
That's what I'm saying too. And that's what I said in my written report.
Do we not accomplish both objectives if we recommend that a report be coordinated between the two of them, since each have factors that can address that?
I think you remove that part.
I'm sorry?
I think to go forward with this committee report, you remove that part.
What part?
The part about figuring out your water district bill. You have mutuals that are paying a pumping fee, you know. Some of the mutuals are quite large. I don't think they're paying a replenishment fee, but I'm not positive. So there are potentially other stakeholders paying a replenishment fee at this time that we don't know about.
Okay.
I would recommend that you remove the part about the water district.
Any other comments? Give it a second.
Turn this on. There we go. Don, you were talking about disclosing fees that are now being charged, right? And the possibility of breaking those out further.
What I had said was before the replenishment fee was even approved by the board, we calculated what the impact would be on our customers, folded that into the bill calculator on our website, and we publicized on our bills, on our website, on our Facebook page. It is a newspaper article that customers can go to the website, put their numbers in, and see what the impact on their bill will be.
Yeah, okay. What I'm suggesting with this attachment is doing the same thing, but now looking ahead to the fully implemented GSP as it now stands, so that the full costs of importing are reflected in there and in your calculator. That's what I'm trying to do here. I'm not dealing with the existing fees. I'm talking about the balance and all of the costs to implement the importing as spelled out in the GSP.
And we would add that to our bill calculator when we have better information. I'm just saying I would be opposed to putting this out. I know I don't have a vote, but I would be opposed to putting that document out to the public, to our customers, with that number on it. I would prefer that we wait until we have a better idea and we can put that number into our bill calculator, and again, publicize to our customers, go to the website, put your actual consumption in there, and see how it affects you personally.
And what number is it you're waiting to get a better read on?
Well, as I said earlier, there's variables in the calculation. Again, I I don't dispute the numbers you put on there. They're, where you got them are valid sources, but those numbers aren't written in concrete, so to speak.
Well, what troubles me is we seem to be saying we shouldn't be giving estimate solid data, whether it's on interest rates or grants or anything else. And that's my problem with my particular constituents. They're saying, what's this going to cost me? They want to know now, and they can't even engage the implementation process without communicating what the costs are to them based on what we know today. The idea of waiting until things become more clear, they'll never be clear. There's always going to be new issues, new data gaps, new prices in the market. You don't need to wait. We have numbers right now that can be plugged right into what the GA is trying to do with importing.
Okay, I think we're arguing about somewhat of the details when we have, to use a current event reference, we have a framework that we perhaps all pretty much have generally agreed to a framework with some specific areas of difference. We've all agreed, I think, to the gaps kind of concept with the, and in general with the 5 recommendations on page 2 of the committee report, with the amended with the inputs that we've had, each of us and the public, about them. What I would propose is we're not going to get to the details of going over every aspect of that and wordsmithing it tonight successfully. And we actually don't have a few of the members present. What I would suggest is that we agree generally, I will withdraw that. We agree to it. We agree this report is a good starting place, and the committee did a lot of hard work on it, and we knew going in that there were going to be some contentious issues. What I would suggest, and I think we've done this twice before with subcommittees, is having heard the opinion of the greater PAC members and inputs of the public here and concerns, and I note West has been taking detailed notes as we've talked. I would propose we ask the subcommittee to go back and in light of all the comments that have been given to try to tighten up addressing those areas that were perhaps too specific to grow to the gap form, focus on the gap format. And then you can, within that and the specific subjects, and then bring an amended draft plan back to the greater PAC at the next meeting, at which we could hopefully get to closure on. So you will identify, the object would be to, having taken all this input, to incorporate it into a second plan and note the areas where the specific disagreement is on your subcommittee, in the case, as Judy did, for an example, last time, with the intent that we could get to a recommendation, a document that we could go forward to the Groundwater Authority Board as a whole, and if we don't agree on those disagreement areas in the greater PAC, or a minority opinion could be forwarded. My report on, if we do that, my report to the PAC, or to the Groundwater Authority, would summarize the 5 areas and the gap focus that we are perhaps recommending, if we agree, that is coming on, so those folks would have an idea of what areas we were focusing on. Because I think we've all pretty much agreed largely what areas of gaps, for lack of a better word, because I think that captures your idea, are being clarified, and this is not unexpected with a diverse group of stakeholders that are sometimes at odds in objectives and effect. We will try to get to a consensus on this, and where we can't, we will identify the differences, the reason for the differences, and then bring it back to the entire committee next week. And I think we've actually all anticipated something like this. Originally, we thought this might take as many as 3 meetings, but not to say I don't think we can come to a conclusion next time, but I'm hopeful that we can.
I have a question.
I have a comment.
Camille first.
So our main disagreements have to do with the attachments. Do we all agree on the general framework of your 5 items? Because I don't see why we couldn't come back and agree on the general framework of 5 items and just say we're working on some examples and just not include any examples.
Well, I think, in my opinion, there were changes to those 5 items. For instance, the gap approach. It's not a poem, but a schedule. There's going to be, we haven't really discussed it, but a bi-monthly update of the QA is not, I don't think, appropriate. But
Right.
I don't think we could wordsmith the individual 5 items at this meeting. That might be what I summarize, is these 5 general subjects are the ones that are being focused on, but we let the subcommittee, having heard all the input here, carefully reword and refocus
The 5 items?
Yeah.
Okay. I just don't want to see us getting bogged down by example handouts that we are not going to agree on unless they're like the first one.
I agree, and I would perhaps suggest that the committee spend its time on the things you can agree on most, because I think there is real heartburn with individual examples to the level of detail that were provided, not just the gap subtopics.
So in reading this again and thinking about it a little bit more, I think what you're trying to calculate here is the impact of the replenishment fee, which is to import water, correct? On individual customers? Is that what you're trying to calculate on the impact?
The worksheet is addressing the expected additional cost to water district customers as a result of implementing the plan based on what we know today.
So that is to acquire a state Title A entitlement. That's what the replenishment fee is for, correct?
Yes.
So I think we're arguing unnecessarily because in the bill calculator, first of all, the 2117, we didn't use that this year because we looked at our actual consumption during 2020, and we determined that we would only need to import, I think it was 1,963 acre feet. So the bill calculator has that in there already. So if your objective is to inform water district customers what the impact is going to be on them individually for importing water via the replenishment fee, it's already in the bill calculator that's there today. So if you go in there and put your consumption in, it'll tell you what the impact will be on your water bill. You can even
You're
put
addressing the existing charges, which do not include infrastructure, transportation, treatment,
well, this
wheeling.
doesn't. Your calculation here doesn't include infrastructure either, does it?
What's that?
Your calculation here doesn't include infrastructure either.
Sure does. The 4,200 includes 177 million of infrastructure, financed at 4% over 30 years. It's right in the technical report. And so is the Title A.
It's the worst case option.
Yeah, and that's covered too. It says the GA is aggressively looking for ways to reduce those costs through grants and any other way they can.
I think this topic is one of the specifics that we're not going to get to tonight.
I have a comment I would like to make. The three things that all of the subcommittee members agreed on, specific things were that they agreed that the website needed to be more user-friendly and have additional information. They agreed that the GA board needs to have an ongoing, whatever you want to call it, we called it the POA&M because that had been used before. It needs to be presented at every single meeting in great detail. And we agreed that the fact sheet was something that would be very useful to those people who come to the GA board and barely know more than the water comes out of their faucet. Those are the three things we really agreed to. So when you make your presentation, if you want to give something, you could say that from the subcommittee. I don't know about the PAC. Well, yes, I do, because Eddie said he didn't care for it.
Just one other point, if we're including the $177 million in that
I'm
number,
sorry?
I said if we're including the $177 million in that calculation.
In the 4250, yes.
Yeah.
Well, all costs are included in that. It's broken out. It's broken out
So
by the
that would be
infrastructure and Title A.
That doesn't include annual O&M costs.
No, they're in there. They're broken out.
What you're showing here is an absolute worst case. I think most people in this community realize that funding the infrastructure is a heavy lift for this community, and that very likely won't happen. I just don't think this community with 30,000 people, whatever, can afford to contribute $177 million plus. And I think it's been said that the intent is if we can acquire the water and have that as an asset, then we can go for federal money for grants to get the infrastructure. So I really don't think it's going to be beneficial to put a worst case number out like that and put that number in people's mind, because it's just going to cause more consternation among customers than I think is necessary.
Should we ask for a vote right now as to whether we should provide specific example documents such as these proposed or a modification of them, or specific summary of a topic and the subtopics that should be on that type of document? For example, the ratepayers, for example, small ag, big ag, whatever, every group. At this point, I believe we have disagreement on that, but I believe we've got a lot of folks that don't believe we should be providing specific example documents with numbers that are variable and questionable in some way or another. Witness the discussion. Or should we go back and ask the subcommittee to consider that in light of the comments that have been given? And I think the GAPS method with specific subtopics in it is a compromise position that perhaps we can all agree to.
But I think I've heard you say, Dave, and I guess I'm agreeing with you. First of all, I heard you say that for the moment, let's consider that our 5 major topics have survived. And we can argue that next.
With minor modifications.
With minor modifications. So let's go forward with that. I've heard people say, let's not get specific yet. I've heard folks say, let's identify gaps, and let's extend that gap concept to all stakeholders, and in fact invite suggestion for gaps from those folks here that represent various stakeholders. So let's identify gaps, and by what we mean by gaps is areas where focused and overview communications are needed and need to be found by the public if they go looking. And so that's what I think I heard you say, is that let's stick with the 5 for now. Let's identify gaps and maybe back away from being specific at this point in time.
And go back and refocus and bring it back next month.
Right. And I guess I didn't, in my notes I've been trying to scribble, I didn't really capture what I consider to be changes that we need to make to the 5. But you did mention the POA&M is maybe not a good choice of words.
Yeah, schedule tied to financials.
And
perhaps.
maybe we just write a brief sentence as what we think the requirement is.
It was also stated that the Q&A that you have down here for twice a month is unrealistic at this time.
I heard it stated, I don't know if we had consensus on that, but that might be.
It was not from one of us, it was from Carol Kiefer Thomas.
Well, I'm not taking a position.
Andover.
I'm just suggesting that we don't have consensus on that yet, and so.
There's a need for a Q&A, but perhaps it doesn't. It's not a periodic update as opposed to as needed, and really there are a lot of things that are influence that. So you can take that your comment about. I think we've reached agreement on the 5 areas in general. And then there are individual pieces, such as with the POAM schedule. In this case, what are the trigger for updating a Q&A? Those are all things that you can take back in the subcommittee.
Perhaps we back away from the bi-monthly concept. Is what I hear you saying.
Well, I think one can have all kinds of neat ideas and no money to do them. No personnel to do them, which is what I stated in my written objections. I didn't really object to it, except I don't think it's practical at this time because of the money source, and we have discussed that in some detail, the concern that replenishment fee money is being used for other than being collected for buying that imported water right. It's a big concern of many people, I might add.
So do we have agreement for the subcommittee to go reconvene, taking the inputs we have here, focus on the 5 areas of general agreement, and the gap methodology, and bring back a recommendation, given all the comments here tonight from members and public, bring back a recommendation at the next meeting?
I think you're giving us, if I understand it correctly, something we need something we can get our teeth into for sure. And when I like the gap concept, and maybe for gap areas, we might provide some examples of how we think that gap, not specific examples, but maybe a list of those things we think we might make sense to put specifically to satisfy any gap we identify.
Exactly.
We would need, for example, if Camille, if you see gaps in information for Trona folks or Sears Valley Mineral folks, it might make sense for you to forward those areas that you think those folks need more clear explanations of what's going on as we move forward. Same for, I would say, large and small ag. If there are gap areas in terms of stakeholders going to the website and finding out from their perspective what's happening or what may happen, that's what I think is the major need that needs to be addressed here. So personally, I think if that is the guidance, if we all agree on what the guidance is, then we have some marching orders.
A clarification, Dave. If there are disagreements within the subcommittee, how would you like those handled? Within the body of the report or as minority footnotes, such as we did in this particular example today?
If they're summarizable, I would suggest this was included. Your report this time included both of those in one sense because Judy pointed out the areas of disagreement that she had with it, but it was included in the report. So it needs to be included in the report,
okay.
And to the degree it can be condensed and what am I trying to say, combined, I think we would like to know exactly what was the level of agreement? What were the subtopics of disagreement and the basic arguments in support and opposition? And of course, those individuals will be able to represent themselves at the next PAC meeting. And that would provide the most information for the committee, the PAC, to consider in advance when you provide the report and what their positions would be. And I would suggest that I don't do what I did today. When we do this next time, to open this agenda item, I would have you, the chair, summarize your report before we begin any comments on it. And that was my mistake this time.
I like that idea. I think it's important. It's just equally important to bring the areas of disagreement and concisely summarize those. That's as important as the other ideas we bring forward, I think.
I agree.
And it looks like you're also asking then for the arguments on both sides of any disagreement, which just did not occur here. Only one side was argued, the other side was just presented.
Yeah, not detailed, just the summary of those, and the individuals can express more detail, because it's got to be something we can all read before the next meeting. And Renee, you had a question?
Yeah. Okay, so you're going to go back and review all these 5 recommendations, correct? That's what the subcommittee's going to do?
With the focus that West addressed, yes.
Okay, but in their review, I mean, are they not going to come up with any documents at all? Like, they did have this fact sheet. I don't know how many people dispute it.
No one disputed the fact sheet.
So
No, that was the one. That was the only one that didn't come up as having objections to.
Okay, so is this acceptable to be part of their 5 recommendations, and that would be eventually forwarded to the Groundwater Authority Board?
I would think so, because I don't know if David does, but it's not a specific, it doesn't discuss specifics. It's tried to be a general overview of the water situation in this valley. It doesn't mention a particular stakeholder as using X amount of water or anything like that. It just simply tries to explain the situation as simply as could be done. If any of you have a better idea or additions, feel free to email West or me, or West, me, and Nick and Lyle, who I guess is sick tonight. He did most of the writing on it, actually. And the intent was to try and educate those people who really don't know anything about it. They don't even know that their water comes from the ground. Mm-hmm. It comes from the faucet.
Okay, well, that's good. I'd like to have some piece of product that should be forwarded to the GA, not just
I don't think it would be forwarded yet.
No, well, I think...
I'm talking about down the road.
Okay.
That's all I wanted to get clarification that this fact sheet at least made the grade.
I think this fact sheet could be an example where you said the gap was basically the history of how we got here and why. And the fact sheet might be presented as a relatively non-controversial detailed subject as an example of how a fact sheet could be used to fill the gaps and subgaps. In the other topics, we know they are all going to have controversy. And so we are recommending those focus areas and sub areas, or the gap and the sub focus areas within the gap to be addressed. And then we can have the discussion of which one of those, if any, we want to provide as examples, or just leave that to the GA staff to figure out and for the board to agree on. Now, they may send one of them back to us and say, hey, review this.
So you're suggesting, are you suggesting that we not provide any examples of a specific, which would include the fact sheet as being too specific, or
No,
you're suggesting that we might include that as one example, but maybe no others?
the example, yes, the latter case.
Okay, if some others came up from some other stakeholder that also seemed equally general, we might consider it. Of course, this is not from a specific stakeholder, the fact sheet. It's general.
I would say yes, because as I was listening to the conversation, I would say the fact that we all agreed on that one, that it wasn't controversial, that it could be provided as a commonly accepted, agreed to document by PAC members of all representation, stakeholder groups. But that, in the case of these other topics, there are enough differing opinions or different issues among the stakeholders that we didn't want to provide the specifics, but we wanted to identify the gaps and let the staff come up with the proper information that they can bring forward. But we're focused. The big plus out of this is we're identifying the areas of discussion and information where the gaps have been from our interaction with our stakeholders or our constituents, if you will. They're not really constituents, but and we're giving the feedback to the board that these gaps need to be addressed. They need to be addressed for each stakeholder, where we're talking about the individual stakeholder bullet, and they need these subtopics tailored for an individual stakeholder group need to be addressed, and that's the value we're providing to the GA and its staff.
And when you give your report in a couple of weeks to the GA board, would you again stress that we welcome any comments from GA board members or their staff?
Yes.
I know you did last time, but I sure didn't
and
get
I did
anything.
in the interim.
Thank you.
Well, there's a lot going on right now, and one of the big focuses, obviously, is getting the new financial system and tracking system, which will have an impact on the schedule, which we're going to get to with the next item. So do we have general agreement that that's the path forward?
Yes, I think so.
A clarification. I think I heard you suggest that we were all in agreement on the fact sheet, and that it was, in effect, ready to go forward or not?
It wouldn't go forward till the whole report goes forward.
Okay.
If that's what you're asking.
Well, okay, so you understand where I'm coming from. I like the fact sheet, but in conjunction with other fact sheets. To me, it's just one stage or one page of a set of handouts that might include more handouts if you want to pick up ag, if you want to pick up cereals and like that. But going forward and saying we all agree with the fact sheet, I don't have any problem with the facts there. I have a problem sending it up by itself. To me, it needs more.
Agreed.
Okay.
Yeah,
I don't think I agree that the fact sheet as it stands is what should be put out at this point. I think there's too much dissension on some of the numbers on the whole thing. I mean, good idea, but I think it goes way beyond what's said in the GSP.
I think he's getting confused with that chart. The fact sheet doesn't have any numbers in it, basically, other than
dates.
Eddie, you said you hadn't had time to review the whole thing in depth. What I've outlined as the approach going forward is this will come back in that format. The fact sheet, particularly as an example, will come back from the committee next time, again for having had time to review it, you'll be able to see whether you do agree with.
Well, the chart is very confusing, and some of the statements in the fact sheet, I think, go way beyond the GSP.
Yeah. Okay, and so it isn't all agreed to yet. And counter to what Nick and I just discussed, it's tentatively agreed, but it will not go out as a report with that until the entire PAC agrees.
Okay.
Yeah, this is West, Eddie. I have a question. When we're talking fact sheet, we just mean the single sheet of paper that says Indian Wells Valley groundwater fact sheet. That's all we're talking about right now. Which really doesn't have many numbers other than dates. But also, I think we should bear in mind that we might want to edit this one pager if we get comments from other folks. But its intent is to be general.
Okay. Well, can we submit the issues that we have with it to you before you come back with the modified fact sheet?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and I'd say submit them through David if you don't mind.
Yeah, keeping in mind Brown Act considerations, if you submit them to me, I will forward them to the subcommittee.
Right. Okay.
Thank you, Eddie. Okay, with that, I think we have addressed item number A. Number B was the individual C&E plan, and we have most of you saying no changes were needed, but we have pointed out a couple things that require update. The district numbers could be, the political contacts may very much likely change given the current CRC draft maps of where Congress is going to be next time. And there are things that are already out of date in it where folks have changed. Renee mentioned some of the specific methods. I think that Renee also brought up the essential drivers, or what was it? Essential, I've forgotten the word, Renee. Essential topics?
It was essential communication strategies from the Owens Valley.
Yeah, that was one of my specific comments. Was there was value in having that section in there, and I would suggest that the individual gap areas are such topics that would go in there. We also made the subject of email addresses, and I think should be brought into it. And I think there was a Privacy Act problem with that. We had that discussion when we originally came up with the plan. The point being, I think we agree that no major structural change is needed at all. There are minor updates that are easily done following the end of the year when we will know what the districts are. All of our districts are up for change right now. The congressional, the assembly, the state senate, and the board of supervisors.
I suggest that in the report we take to the GA, when we take a completed report, that we target those pages and say that they need to be updated periodically appropriate to the political conditions of the time, because the districts are going to change in December, and theoretically Shannon Grove will no longer be our state senator and Vince Fong will no longer be our state assemblyman, and then a year from now there will be an election, and whoever is the person may not be reelected. And the same holds true for the Board of Supervisors.
Agreed, and that is a change to the plan, and that's part of the recommendation. But the key thing that I think that it's not just an update of existing information is I believe what you've identified, we're calling the gaps now, are the essential topics, examples of what was in that Owens Basin plan. And I believe we're talking, how many essential topics do we, maybe 6 items we have for inclusion. That would be the significant update to the plan that we might add in. And if between now and next meeting we have anyone who brings up new technical methods of communication, they submit them to go as part of the update to the methods discussion. But they're the only thing that I would call beyond an update of existing information, and we focused on those areas. The only thing I would suggest going beyond that are those things that I'm calling essential topics that might come out of your committee report next time, the gaps. And I think that's valuable.
So what I think I hear saying, I hear Judy recommending that we just advise the GA they need to keep the names current in the C&E plan, and then we don't chase it down.
The names and districts.
Names and districts,
Okay.
but I think I heard you say.
But there's
yeah.
something missing on elected officials. Come on, we have 2 U.S. senators, and only one former one is listed.
Yeah, we can point out the gaps.
Yeah, I will point those out.
Yeah, I know how that happened. There's an unofficial division of responsibilities in the Senate for certain things in the state, but it's not written anywhere.
Yeah, but that senator that was left off there is probably one of the most valuable senators to us.
But did I hear you recommend that we not worry about chasing down the names, Judy, but we recommend that it be done?
Correct.
That would be a staff responsibility, a GA staff responsibility, to periodically say, oh yeah, we had an election and so-and-so got elected and so-and-so didn't. So we better change the name and the phone number and all that stuff.
And Dave, I think I heard you say, other than that, let's wait and see if any of the gaps we identify mature to the point that we would recommend them to be written up in the C&E plan specifically.
Yep. So these 2, 6A and B, would be brought back. We pretty much agreed that we would say recommend to update the political context by the staff periodically when things change, keep it up to date. But the determination to add additional subjects like the essential focus areas await your determination and the outcome of the subcommittee report on the primary gap areas.
As a subcommittee member, I would like input from the PAC members on what they think the gaps are, if there are any that we have not discussed. Send them to David.
Agreed.
We already asked that.
Any other PAC member comment on this issue?
Yeah, I have a sentence here. Can you hear me?
Yes, Ed.
The Indian Wells Valley has been pumping 3 to 4 times more water from the basin than is being recharged every year for about 50 years. You know, I'm not sure that really is correct and whether we really have an idea of past pumping amounts.
It's something.
So that's just one example.
It's something that has been discussed before the GA came into creation in the Technical Advisory Committee that used to meet in the Water District office.
Noted, Ed.
Well,
Noted,
that
Ed.
saying is a history that I'm not sure is correct.
Okay.
This is West. I'm kind of taking the point of view that if it's in the GSP, it is the technical basis that exists right now that we move forward with. And so from that point of view, I think we should use numbers that are basically in the GSP, bearing in mind those could change in the future.
Other member comment? Public comment from the room? Public comment from the phone calls? None seeing. We'll move to the first draft GA schedule review and comment. And as a preparation or introduction for that, Carol, did you want to address this, or you want me to take a shot at it?
Well, you're welcome to, Dave. I think you had a conversation with maybe with Steve Johnson and others on what it was going to look like.
Yeah, I didn't get it. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I know we've talked a little bit about what we can provide. You know, you've talked about, or we've heard a lot of folks ask for a poem. Clearly that's something that's great for a project. It was great, I think, for the development of the GSP. Now we've got all these many activities that have come from the GSP. So it's much harder for us to do to do a poem, to do something like that for each activity. Much harder to track and keep up with in terms of putting all of that information down, on a regular basis. But we've tried to put together a simplified schedule, I think, with that lists most of those tasks with some time schedules, recognizing that they're going to go out several years. And they're very general, and I think this was put out for discussion purposes. But with that, I'll let you add, any of the information or insights that you have on it.
Somebody's cell phone is ringing. Interesting, it stopped. So thank you, Carol. Yeah, this is a first. My understanding is this is a first cut general shot at a schedule. It is not meant to be anything remotely approaching formal. It is a shot at identifying at the top level the tasks, as Carol talked about, spreading. These are the tasks associated with the GSP implementation overall, and that there will be more detailed plans perhaps under each one, but not to the level of detail and interlinking that happens on a POAM with a specific deliverable and a fund source for the POAM. The exact POAM term implies all those linkages, and it costs a lot of money to do as opposed to a schedule linked to finances, which I think is what this group, this committee, has said the public and we are looking for, and that includes or requires the implementation of the software program, Carol, that your company is bringing to us, and I think accelerating it, as was discussed at the last GA board meeting, will be great in further developing this schedule. I think our task before us today is to say, as a first cut of the general tasks and functions, what would we like to see, what kind of amplified information would we like to see for the staff, the public, and ourselves moving forward, recognizing that it's going to come with a cost to get closer to a full POAM type schedule, which is not really doable with all the different variables involved in many of these functions. We've taken a long time talking tonight about the funding difficulties and variables involved in that, for example. So, but to get an idea down to a monthly level, this is at a yearly level, I think what we would like to see ultimately is a monthly level of disclosure on tasks and finances linked to them, and that would be my suggestion. I would open it up for discussion.
Well, I didn't have very much time to look at it. I only got it late morning. And I know that April would have sent it out if she had had it earlier. I think that is a big communication problem that exists with Stetson Engineers as a consultant. They did the same thing with the GSP. We got parts of it very late to review. My concern is the GSP has not been finalized by DWR. And to spend time and look at implementation of a lot of different things when we don't know whether they're going to be approved or not is costly, takes time, and for me it's a concern.
Other comments?
I guess I don't quite understand your concern. I mean, we need to move forward with these tasks, I think, that are listed here. You're not saying we don't do that.
You don't know whether we need to move forward with these tasks because they are implementation tasks that are listed in the GSP. And we don't know what the Department of Water Resources is going to approve and not approve.
Under SGMA, the authority to move forward with executing the plan began with the submission of the plan. Renee, you have a comment?
Yeah, I was hoping that there would be more detail, like next to some of these tasks where the PAC and the TAC are supposed to help, review or whatever. I saw none of that in this. But the other thing is I thought we might have, like you said, like a 3-month plan or something quarterly, or if not, if it's too hard to do it every month, but show like what the GA is supposed to be doing now.
Yeah, this isn't, as I said, this is just a first cut.
Yeah, this shows this is starting in January of 2022, so I thought there would be something more close to what's happening now. I know there's only 2 months left in the year, but I would like to see detail on any of these tasks where the PAC and or the TAC can be participants somewhere. Some of these, because
I think that's the next. That's one of the next tasks as they move forward in developing this.
The old poem that was generated, 3 or 4 years ago now, when the commander that sits on the board.
Long bottom.
Yeah, he was constantly updating it.
And that was the running a poem is a very expensive process.
So
a true poem.
Can the Navy help us again and do it again?
Well, as Carol said, the poem is on a focused task. Mm-hmm. These are multiple things that are interdependent but not focused due to all the variables. It is very expensive to run a full poem. When we say the word poem, I think we're not differentiating what that formally means in terms of executing a project compared to a schedule linked to finances, which is doable. I mean, it's really what you need to run a program or a project with a lot of uncertainties. And as I mentioned, this is a first draft. They want to hear from us. They're going down further in detail. It may not be monthly, but I think that should be their target. And it should include, as they get down to that level of detail, what subjects would be presentable to the PAC or TAC as we had, and we asked them for in the poem. I think that's very appropriate to continue with a integrated schedule linked to finances or linked to expenditures and finances.
All of these topics are totally general, like 2022 data collection. how's one supposed to evaluate that when you don't know what the data collection is
That's
about?
That's the next level of detail. I agree with you.
And I do note also, Carol, if you're still there, that it has an annual report, and the first annual report listed is the 2022 report. What's happening with the 2021 report, for instance? It should be on here first. 2021 is about to come to a close.
I'd have to look more closely at it. I was thinking that was what they might have had in mind, but the 2021 is due, and we're going to have a report on that, I think, at the next meeting. The 2021 report is due, I think, in April. So we're still gathering data and working on that.
But it should be the first thing on this list, not the 2022 report.
Correct.
Right?
I guess depending on what the schedule is, that could be the case, yeah.
This is West. I had a couple observations. I think this is an important first step. It might make sense for us to be thinking about what we see kind of as the requirements, at least in general terms, to be satisfied by something like this. And I don't know if I know what they all are right now, but for example, I think we probably need to be able to, ultimately, the general tasks have to be composed of at least somewhat specific tasks that you've assigned costs and manpower to. And so in like a spending plan, we would, I think, want to be able to show the public that we kind of know kind of how much we're going to expend, recognizing that, as David mentioned, the nature of this kind of work, that can change. But I think to show confidence to the public, we probably want to at least understand things like what are the allocations in to these tasks. And another example of what I might consider a requirement would be maybe it should go to enough detail that you can see like where critical paths are. That instead of these tasks just go on generally, there are going to be some things that have to happen by certain dates for other things to start. And sometimes if those things slip, that I'm sure you understand the concept of a critical path, that these are the things that have to happen on time or the whole overall schedule slips. Now, that might be too much detail, but somehow I think we need to have confidence that we understand how these tasks link together to move forward. I mean, I think for you to do your job, and I realize there's a number of years of loose financial tracking and things done on a piece of 8.5 by 11 paper or whatever it was, that are coming home to roost now. And so I think this is very important what you're doing, and maybe one of our offerings might be sort of what we think the requirements might be, so that the public is satisfied and they're convinced that you guys have your, know where the money's going to a certain level of detail at least.
So West, and I agree, that's much more eloquently stated than I stated it. It is really what are the key requirements that are needed, keeping in mind the cost that would entail, and time, which is cost on staff. And I think that's really what their first draft was intended to get out of us. And so perhaps if we each individually submit what we think are requirements that should be in this, keeping in mind cost, in a prioritized order, that we can have more discussion on that. I think we've identified the big ones right now, but we can have more discussion next month.
Another thing missing is what pot of money is going to pay for which task.
That's when I say financial tracking, that's what I mean, but yes.
Yes.
So should we identify them here and now, these requirements, or should we each submit, having had this in hand but not having had adequate time to review it, should we look at this, and if you forward them back to me by your individual inputs on what are the requirements we want to see within a schedule by perhaps the next GA meeting, the date of the next GA meeting. I can collate them and get them into the Stetson and Carroll and we can, we can do it simultaneously, forward them and then review them at our next meeting for a unified recommendation. But forwarding them now gives them a chance. They're working on this as we speak, and they're doing it in conjunction with developing the financial software. So that gives them extra time, recognizing that it's the holidays approaching.
It might also be helpful too, as you put together your comments, because you can see that this is pretty broad, and there are a pretty big variety of tasks that are listed here. Maybe there are some here that you don't think need to be on this list. So it might be helpful if you can identify the priority tasks that you would like to see more information on.
I think that's reasonable, Carol. Although we don't have full insight to what some of the issues are affecting that, I think it's a good idea for us from our perspective to give you that recommendation.
Many of the things on the list are when they are broken down, are technical, so it would seem that this should go to the TAC committee also.
Agreed.
I just have a question regarding financial tracking. That's going to automatically be done with their financial software that they're going to integrate into this system. Is that?
Carol, you have more familiarity with that. What's in that?
Well, it's going to be helpful. It's a fund accounting software program, so it's going to help us with our fund accounting, and it's going to help us with the clarity and transparency in how we can track and report our financials by the different fees or funding sources. So in that respect, I think it will be helpful. Now for us to, it's not going to automatically, just track it. It's still going to require, it's going to be tied to our budget, obviously. We're going to have budgets for the individual tasks that are approved for next year, for the following year. And so we'll be able to, all of this will have to be done more manually than automatically, but it will help us to track that information by fund.
So, and Carol, in thus doing, as you've explained it, I understood that that's going to give us the link of a task and expenditure, or task and allocation and an expenditure against a task. Is that correct?
Yes.
I had a couple of questions. I like where things are headed here. I just was wondering what software you used to print out the charts you provided here, just out of curiosity.
I couldn't tell you. Heather Steele at Stetson sent that to us. Okay. I don't know what she used.
And then the other question I had, it seems kind of the nature of the company you work for is to provide this kind of support, I'm assuming, to other organizations like the Groundwater Authority. And so I would think that as an organization you might have kind of a requirement for software that might support your organization as a whole. Just a question.
Well, we are proposing to implement this accounting program, and RGS is already using it with. They're using it internally, and they're using it with other agency partners, and it's working out really well. And it's user friendly, provides really clear reports. So in that respect, I think yes, it's a program. It's relatively new as far as RGS using it, but it is already being used for other agencies.
So basically, we're sharing the cost with other agencies and hopefully the training.
Yeah, it's more the costs that are going to be associated are more in terms of implementation, setting it up.
Thank you, Carol. So we've identified, I think, our task to give individual requirements of what we would like to see in a draft schedule that includes financial accounting, or that includes financial link to the tasks. And we're also going to comment on the items priority-wise that we think need to be focused on or dropped from this, what level of detail or interest we have, keeping in mind that our target audience is ourselves, the staff, and the public. Any other member comment?
I have a comment. I was not here when the infamous poem was developed. So basically, my question has to do with the emphasis on the schedule as opposed to the financials. Because a lot of these tasks, at least from this first cut, are ongoing tasks that are going to happen every month or just on an ongoing basis from now until eternity. For me, it's not as important to know what the scheduling is of those tasks. If they're ongoing, I want to know the financials. I want to know what the budget is. I want to know how we're performing against budget, why we blew the budget, why, what was involved in forming the budget, what assumptions were made, that sort of thing. So I would rather focus more on the financial side than the actual scheduling side, especially given something like this.
Yeah,
and
I
also the GSP has certain milestones that they want at certain times. So, and whatever funding we have as far as various grants, et cetera, have their own internal schedules. So to some extent, the scheduling kind of schedules itself. For me, the more important part is the financial part. So I prefer to focus on that.
I agree, and that's the part that hopefully that software, together with manual, as Carol mentioned, will elicit that or illuminate that information. But I agree, a schedule is has not much meaning until linked to the budget allocation and execution.
Well, also until this project or whatever you have on the line is specific, so you know what you're dealing with. I mean, data collection could be anything from looking at your smartphone to going out in the field and picking up 29,000 rocks.
I would hope each of these major tasks would have at least a brief description of what it is, and in some cases it may be need to be broken down into more detailed subtasks, but each need to carry a cost or a financial element.
Okay, do we have comments from the public in the audience? Comments from the public online? Public online hasn't been real involved tonight. Good, okay. Any other member comments to close? Our task is to get those individual comments to me by the next GA, which is the second Wednesday of the month, 2 weeks from now. Future agenda items, this is just for us to reference. These are the planned ones in priority order. So we have the continued C&E plan for review and recommendations. Obviously, what isn't in here until we had inclusion of this first draft today is the next one in priority is the schedule, and then the draft ordinance if required, and the policy in that order. So that's tentatively what we have on our plate for the next meeting. It will likely be A and a sub-I, the schedule to review. So similarly, the same things that we had for this meeting. Any comments on that?
I just have a question. Is the Groundwater Authority wanting us to review these B and C? Are they coming up? Are they coming up like in January, or are we going to have these?
Yeah, is there an urgency, Carol, to B or C?
I am not looking at the agenda. Can you tell me what those items are?
Yeah, B is the draft ordinance on temporary/emergency water use and waiver.
Okay. Yeah. No, that's not urgent.
Okay, and C is provide recommendations on the IWVGA quote policy unquote for non-compliant pumpers, new pumping/water use for illegal operations, excessive water use/persistent water leaks, verification of de minimis pumping, and other pumping issues to make the GA more effective.
No, I think we have time for both of those items.
Okay.
I have a question for Carol. Why is the last item that David mentioned, which is excessive and illegal water use, even on the agenda at this point, when you do not have a staff to carry out any policy that might be created?
Well, it's a policy, I think, for how we deal with it. And so part of that is how we deal with it, which might be directing it to the appropriate code enforcement agency.
Okay.
Or encouragement. That was the discussion we had at the GA meeting about what this might be.
Oh, absolutely. Depending on who the entity is, if it's a pumper, for instance, it might just be encouragement, right?
Public comment on this agenda item? Future agenda items?
I just want to review then. The only agenda item we're going to really discuss at the next meeting is the continued discussion on the C&E plan.
And the schedule one. We'll have the schedule, if there's a new draft, we'll continue that discussion. Well, and obviously, even if there isn't a new draft update, we will have the distribution of our individual comments on the plan requirements and priorities to discuss as a group. So I envision those will be the two that, in the absence of, other direction or items that come up between now and then, those will be our next two agenda items. Okay. Confirm item number 9. Confirm next regular meeting for November and December. November is a lot easier than December is going to be, I think. If everybody will reference your calendars. Our November meeting would be on Thanksgiving Day, and I'm not going to eat my expensive turkey in this room, even if I had somebody that was willing to cook it for me in advance. Obviously, the day after is probably not the best option, as most folks make Thanksgiving a 4-day event that weekend and are traveling. Or have been. And Wednesday is the travel day or prep day. So my phone, there's my calendar back. So it seems to me the options are Monday or Tuesday, if there aren't any conflicts with this room, or the first weekend. Sorry, or.
How about the 29th of November? It's the Monday after.
Yeah, I was about to say the next month. Now that is in the week in between, and that's probably fine, between Thanksgiving and Christmas. It's not as bad as the week after Christmas, which we'll get into discussing next. But so the 29th or 30th, I think there may be a conflict with Mondays in this room, but that's a fifth week of the month, so we have maximum opportunity. But it looks like the two best options are Monday the 22nd or 23rd, and then the next two are the 29th and 30th.
I may not be available the week before Christmas. Before Thanksgiving.
How about, are other folks not available for any of those days? So you're suggesting the 29th or 30th as a preference, Judy?
Yes.
Okay. What I'd suggest is if everybody believes they can do the 29th or 30th, I contact the city and arrange which one of those dates they would be able to support, that they don't have any conflicts.
Sure, and we don't, as far as I'm concerned, we don't have to do it at this time. We could do it earlier in the day if necessary.
Yeah, now I have conflicts. So we'll hold that open as an option, because without that level of the research I have to do with the city, we don't know fully what our options. But if I've got a 2-day option on a specific day, we can move forward with that. Does anyone else have a conflict in the daytime?
I have a conflict during the day.
I figured. So the preferable time is the same time on Monday the 29th or Tuesday the 30th. Okay, we'll move forward with that for November. Now advance your calendars to December. And you see, Christmas is on the Saturday. Our meeting would be on Christmas Eve on the 23rd.
I might suggest we just schedule November at this time, and then the November meeting we worry about December, because that's quite a ways away. With the holidays, who knows what's going to happen. So,
okay. And I was going to say that at least will get you thinking. This will be an agenda item next month, and I agree with your suggestion. Is let's do our closer to next month, or closer to December, obviously. The end of next month, we'll know a lot more about our December schedules, but keep in mind, we're going to have to pick a time, and the week after Christmas is generally not available. The week before is full of prep for everything, and we'll want to consider what we want to do.
The GA meeting in December is early. It's on the 8th.
Yeah, that's the second Wednesday. That's normal time.
Yes, but the 1st of December is on
right.
on a Wednesday, so it's early.
Okay, so be ready to talk about the December meeting at the next meeting. All right, closing member comments. Ed, do you want to kick us off, please?
No comment.
Thank you, Ed. Camille?
No comment.
Judy?
The only comment I have is the Eastern Kern Resource Conservation District, who I represent, also sent a letter to the Department of Water Resources regarding, I forget what it's called. Yes, the facilitation, that we would be interested in participating in that.
West?
Just an observation. I think we're dancing in tighter circles around the various bonfires, starting to feel the heat. That's probably about where we want to be. So that probably means we're doing some good. If nothing else, just getting arguments on the table.
Thank you, Wes. Renee?
I want to thank the subcommittee for their work on the recommendations that you came up with. Thank you.
Thanks.
No comment.
Don? Wait a minute. If you wait longer, if you press it and wait longer, give it a chance.
Finally. Echo what Renee said. Just want to acknowledge the effort that the subcommittee put into putting the document together. I know people sometimes forget that this is all uncompensated, that people volunteer to do this. So it's a lot of effort to put into something like this on their own time, and thank you for it.
Yeah, in closing, I would like to very much foot stomp those compliments to the subcommittee for taking this on. But watch out you don't dance so close around the fire that you're going to singe something critical. And thanks in advance for taking on a second round at this. And it is really important to get all the subjects, all the critical subjects on the table and the disagreements and the rationale behind them. I think that's very helpful, whether we can get to the highest level of consensus we can, but we can identify the rest of the issues around each. So with that, we'll close tonight's meeting.